Hey guys, OG Albine here, bringing you guys a pretty cool little video here. The other day I was kind of sitting back and if you guys don't know me, I'm a giant nerd for stats when it comes to mons. I love looking back at the exact, kills and deaths and spreads and stuff like that I used in past seasons. So I have a big doc that has a good majority of the stats of the mons I've used throughout, my draft league career, which has only been Gen 7. So I was kind of looking back on that, and it kind of gave me the idea of maybe making a video on, my personal favorite mods to use in the draft league format for Gen 7, kind of as a recap as we are going into Gen 8 in these next couple weeks here. Kind of just recapping which mods I like the most, why I like them, and then kind of telling you guys exactly how I perform with them stats-wise and all that stuff. So I thought that would be a pretty fun idea. Today we're going to be doing just my favorite mod of each type to use in the draft league format in Gen 7, which is pretty cool. We'll have, the stats and stuff like that of them as well, which will be a lot of fun. But yeah, with that being said, this is probably going to be a really long video. So let's just jump in right now while we still can. So first off, we have bug. We're going to be going in alphabetical order. And by far, my favorite bug type to use is 100% Scolipede. Scolipede is an absolute blast to use. It's one of the best late game cleaners, in my opinion, in the format. Really phenomenal steal in the in tier 2. I think it's a great tier 2. If you look at it just at face value too, stats wise, it's nothing phenomenal. Its stats are all mediocre or bad. Like its defenses, it's very frail. Definitely not a very high special attack. Its attack is, very mediocre at 100. It's 112 speed. It's a great speed tier to hit. However, that's not anything crazy, but when you pair that with speed boost plus like a swords dance and maybe a life orb or a Z move or something like that, once this mon gets rolling, it is incredibly hard to slow down, and that's kind of the main allure with Scolipede here. That alone though isn't really enough to kind of soar to the heights in which I like it so much. It also has access to the fast spikes and the fast T spikes, which is really nice on potential hazard stacking builds. This is a great, like suicide lead with like a focus sash endeavor set with like a, toxic spikes or something like that, being able to, take some things down. And then sub endeavor is also a really fun set. I love that set. It's a great, just fat, breaking down like a certain fat mon you need broken down. I brought that versus a Celesteela at least twice, I think, at this point in my draft league career. Really fun one to use. I absolutely love it, and I love its design too. It's probably one of the coolest design bug types in my personal opinion. I think Gen 5 bugs in general just look super dope. This Volcarona, Galvantula is pretty cool. But yeah, Scolipede, not Volcarona, is definitely one of my personal favorites to use in the draft league format. I've drafted it 4 times across Gen 7, which is a decent amount. It's picked up 26 kills and it's died 4 times, which is pretty solid in my opinion. So yeah, Scolipede definitely one of the mods I really do enjoy using in the format. Next up, we have the dark typing, where we have Greninja, a really low tier pick for this list. Most of this list is going to be tier 1s and tier 2s. Greninja is a tier 3, however, I personally believe that it is by far the best tier 3 available. This thing is phenomenal. Its speed is insane at 122. 103 special attack and 95 attack aren't insane, but when you pair that with a boosting item, it can hit pretty decently hard, and also mix because they are so similar and, stuff like that. And when you pair that with its insane move pool and its insane coverage that it gets, this mon is an absolute menace to certain teams with, like, Life Orb or Specs or even a Z move. I've had Z move Greninja before. I personally think it usually appreciates another item a little bit more, but it's still incredibly solid with the Z. Throwing off like Z Darks, maybe like a Hydro Vortex. I've brought in, what do you call it? What's the poison one? Acid Downpour. I've brought in that before for certain fairy types and stuff like that. So Greninja is incredibly solid, and on top of its immense offensive move pool with stuff like Gunk Shot and Grass Knot and things like that, it also has access to U-turn, so it can be a very fast pivot, which is great. Also has access to both spikes again, so it's another really fast spiker, which is really good. If you can force some switches, which this thing definitely will do with its immense coverage, you can get up a layer or 2 with this, which is gonna in turn exert a lot more offensive pressure for the rest of your team and for Greninja later in the game when things are trying to switch in on it. Sometimes the spike is the difference between Hydro Pump to it KOing and not to KOing. So Greninja is a blast to use. I again think it's by far the best tier 3. Its speed tier on top of its mixed prowess and insane move pool is just super valuable in my opinion. But yeah, in the 4 times that I drafted Greninja throughout Gen 7, it actually picked up 32 kills and 18 deaths. So I drafted it 4 times as a tier 3, and it picked up 32 kills, which is one of the higher mons on this list, honestly, kills wise. Like I think this is one of the mons I utilize really, really well. I love Greninja. Super, super solid. But yeah, next up, we have Dragon, which is going to be a little bit more of a predictable pick in Zygarde 50%. I think a lot of people really enjoy Zygarde. Myself being one of them, Zygarde is an absolute monster. It's so much fun to build with because of its, just immense bulk. Pretty much always allowing it to get up a Dragon Dance, get up a Coil or something like that. Like, I know it has that glaring 4 times ice weakness, and people think, oh, you can just tech on a HP Ice and it won't be as big of a problem. But there's very few HP Ices in the game that Zygarde's going to just drop to, provided you EV correctly. And plus 1,000 arrows, plus 1 E speed, a plus 1 outrage, a Z outrage, it's not going to tickle despite it only having 100 base attack. Like, this thing, once it starts getting rolling, it's kind of like Scorpion. Once this thing starts moving and stuff like that, it's really, really hard to stop. There's a reason this is one of the better tier ones in my opinion. I think this thing is absolutely terrifying. Again, its bulk is pretty insane. 108 HP. My bad. I almost discounted it there. 121 defense and 95 speed def. This thing again is incredibly bulky. You can pretty much always get up either a Dragon Dance or Coil, and Coil is definitely a very, very viable option, especially being that you have access to E-Speed, which is really good priority. Makes it, gives it a really fast, a really strong priority move, which is really good. Banded is obviously a great set on Zygarde, just so you get that immediate breaking power. You don't have to waste time setting up the Dragon Dance if you're not looking for Zygarde to sweep and more so for it to break. Banded is probably the route you want to go. In most weeks, all you're going to need is 1,000 arrows plus maybe, like Outrage or something like that, Outrage E-Speed. And Zygarde's going to punch a hole through a good majority of teams with those moves. It's a great Z move abuser. Z-Dragon, Z-Grounder, the most likely ones you're going to see in most matchups. But I've run like Darkinium Z to break through a slow roll before. I've gotten a bunch of different sets. And it also has, really good defensive utility. I've brought in like Rest Talk Zygarde. I've brought in Subtoxic Protect versus a Tapu Bulu, Slowbro, Tornty, like regen annoying team like that. And it put in an absolute ton of work in that game. I believe that was NCP Wi-Fi semifinals that I brought that set. But yeah, Zygarde 50% is an absolute menace. I think most people at this point know it. It's incredibly bulky. It can be incredibly strong. And 1,000 arrows is, probably the most busted offensive move in the game. So that definitely helps its case. In the 3 times that we drafted Zygarde 50%, we picked up 36 kills with it, and it died 17 times. So this mod performed phenomenally for me. It did the absolute most work. All 3 times I drafted it. It was a huge threat on opponents. So yeah, that's going to be Zygarde. Next up, we have Electric with another very predictable pick. And we have Tapu Koko here, rocking out with an insane 130 speed stat. This thing outspeeds just about everything, which is great in an electric type. And it's an electric type with U-turn and Volt Switch, so it serves as such a phenomenal fast pivot. It's insane. It has the natural bulk to live, a good majority of neutral hits. It's usually not going to just drop to a Light Breeze. Is my main kind of point there. You can always EV it to live certain hits. It's great with, certain resistance barriers, like Shuka Koko has run certain resistance barriers. It's only weak, I guess it's weak to other types of the fairy, but most of the time you're going to see something like Shook on this if you really want to bury on it, just to lure the potential, Garchomps of the world and things like that, but, or like the Landos of the world. But Koko is, despite only having 95 special attack, incredibly strong in electric terrain with its T-Bolts boosted by it. It's going to really put dents in opponent's teams, especially if it's a Life Orb set, especially if you're even Specs. Specs Koko is an absolute menace for a lot of teams to switch into. And then it has that base 115 attack that I feel like people seem to forget about a lot of times, at least people who haven't used Koko very much or newer people using it, they think, oh, I use T-Bolt, D-Gleam, that kind of thing. But it still has 115 base attack, which is a whole 20 points higher than special attack. This thing is very viable physical. It's a very viable mixed. It has access to, obviously Wild Charge and Stab, but it has access to Brave Bird, which is really cool, breaking down bulky grasses that can potentially check this thing otherwise. It has access to Roost. It has access to Defog, so it's a really fast defogger. It has access to Calm Mind to boost up and potentially win games. This thing is amazing with a Z Crystal. Farium and Electrium are obnoxious, just really obnoxious to deal with. And then it has cool utility options. It has dual screens. Like I said, it has Defog, it has Nature's Madness, which is phenomenal at breaking down checks to this thing, so that later in the game you can go in, or breaking down checks to other mons that might, kind of overlap with checking Coco and the other mon on your team. So Nature's Madness is a really good tool. It has incredibly fast taunt, again, a base 130 speed. All of these utility moves are incredibly useful because you're basically guaranteed to get them off. So you're always going to get some use out of time with Coco in every single game. I don't think every time I drafted Coco, I don't think there was a game where I didn't bring it because it always had some kind of role, something to fulfill. So I always ended up bringing it just because, in my opinion, it is that good. But yeah, in the 3 times that we did draft Tapu Koko, it had 26 kills and 13 deaths, which is pretty solid. That is a 2 KOs per 1 death. So if you can go 2 for 1 with them on, just overall, that's absolutely phenomenal. Regardless of what tier it's in and all that stuff. So yeah, that's Coco. Next up, we have the fairy typing in Mega Diancie. Now, I love strong breakers, and Mega Diancie is the epitome of that. It has 160 in each of its attacking stats, which is insane. Its dual stabs are really terrifying for a lot of teams to switch into. Unless you're Steel type, you're not really taking on those dual stabs very well at all. And if you are a Steel type, we still have Earth Power waiting for you. So this thing just really does put in a lot of pressure on teams. It's a fast rocker, which is great. It's a rocker with Magic Bounce, and I feel like people kind of sleep on Magic Bounce as an ability on Mega Diancie. Not on other mons, but definitely on Mega Diancie because of how frail it seemed to be. But Magic Bounce on Mega Diancie really does award aggressive players and people who are willing to play aggressive with it. You're not necessarily always going to bounce back rocks, always going to bounce back toxic, but if you're incredibly if you're aggressive and that's what they're going for, being able to bounce back those rocks and just being a nuisance is really awesome. It also has access to another fun one. It's a Sub Endeavor set. I love that set so much. It's really solid. Being able to basically take them on down with you. Again, it's a fast rocker. It has access to Rock Polish and Calm Mind. You're going to see Rock Polish more often than you see Calm Mind in most games, in all honesty, just so you can boost up past that Scarfer range and potentially just break through teams and just clean up. But Calm Mind is definitely a viable option. I've brought Dual Dance before even because in some matchups, its dual stabs are good enough to just kind of run through teams, or you can go, 1 stab and Earth Power or something like that. But Mega Diancie is great. It's another mon that really benefits from a league that doesn't have first turn, like the first turn Mega Claws, like where you have to Mega Evolve the first turn, because regular Diancie is much bulkier, so you can take advantage of that, get up a Rock Polish, get up a Calm Mind, something like that, Mega Evolve the next turn, and then start to wreak some havoc. So again, Mega Diancie is by far one of my favorite megas to use. It's one of the first megas I really used when I really started to get headstrong into the draft league format and stuff like that. So yeah, if in the 3 times that I drafted Mega Diancie, it picked up 28 kills and died 16 times. So again, 2 kills for every 1 death. I will take that 100% of the time with pretty much any mon that we're using. That's incredibly great value that you're getting out of it. And yeah. Next up for fighting, we have yet another Mega and yet another breaker, probably one of the best breakers in the format at the very least, in Mega Medicham. Mega Medicham, like I said, it's insanely hard to switch into. Psychic Fighting is such a scary typing, and that on top of it's massive attack stat, which is obviously doubled because of, is it Pure Power or Huge Power? I know it's one of those two. I feel like it's Pure Power with Mega Medicham and it's Huge Power with Mega Mawile. Regardless, they both do the same exact thing, though, and that makes this thing's attack jump to astronomical levels. It makes this thing absolutely terrifying to switch into. Again, its dual stabs hit so much of the metagame. The only thing that can really potentially switch in and check this thing is psychic types. Really bulky, physically defensive psychic types. But even then, Mega Medicham, if you can catch him with a double edge on the switch, you can 2-hit KO most of those as well. Which is pretty insane. It has great priority options in Fake Out and Bullet Punch. Bullet Punch for those fairy types that would pressure it offensively if they're faster, like the Mega Diancies, the Rubombies of the world, stuff like that. They usually just drop to the Bullet Punch, right off the rip. It has the Elemental Punches. It has access to Bulk Up. It has access to Recover. Baton Pass in leagues that do allow Baton Pass if you want to grab some momentum. I think leagues that allow Dry Pass at the very least, Mega Medicham really benefits that. You draft this with a strong Dark type to Pursuit Trap those psychics and those potential ghosts and stuff like that when switching on your high jump kicks, which is obviously really nice. I absolutely love Mega Medicham. I have a blast, with those mons that you literally just come in, you kind of click a button with, and Medi is 100% one of those. This thing is terrifying to prep for, and it's a bunch of fun to use against your opponent. In the 2 times that I drafted Mega Medicham, only 2, it picked up 15 kills and 7 deaths, which is very, very solid. Again, that's above a 2 kills per 1 death. A little bit above it. I don't know the exact, number, but again, that's very, very solid, especially in a mon that's kind of just a breaker. It's going to come in and claim 1 or 2 kills a game. Not really going to sweep your opponents, but it's definitely going to put the hurt on and really chip down your opponents and, put them in a position where your other win cons can potentially pick up the dub for you. Next up, we have Mega Charizard Y. We are staying on the Mega train. We are staying on the strong breaker train. Megazard Y is 100% one of those. 159 special attack, Fire Blast in the sun is 2-hit KOing like everything. It's just absolutely massacring teams. Unless you're a bulky water type, in that case, we have a Solar Beam waiting right here for you, which is definitely not fun. Air Slash is a decent stab as well. The only thing that really does kind of switch in and check Zard, in my opinion, are like certain potential dragon types that can take, the Fire Blast while in the sun and then not be hit by the Solar Beam. But even in then, you do have the option of Dragon Pulse. It's not the funnest to run Dragon Pulse on Zard, just because there's, it feels like a wasted move slot because it's literally only for the other dragon. But it's still a solid option nonetheless if that's, their only check to you. You also have great mix capabilities with Zard. 104 attack in the sun, with Flare Blitz is not going to tickle. You can bring Dragon Dance on this as well. Zard X isn't the only one that can DD up. You can bring Swords Dance even. I think Dragon Dance is much more of a viable option. I love mixed Dragon Dance Zard Y. It's one of my favorite sets I've ever brought to a league game. I think it's an absolute blast. It can really catch your opponent off guard. Again, it has access to Flare Blitz, has access to Earthquake. Same moves that Zard X has access to. It just has that massive special attack stab behind it too, which is, again, terrifying. This thing is also very deceptively bulky, especially in the Spadef area. You can take a lot of those HP rocks that people are going to throw your way, provided you just throw in a little bit of bulk in the right areas and stuff like that. And that plus its HP, you can, potentially live certain hits and stuff like that. Obviously, you have the crippling 4x stealth rock weakness, which is really tough. But if you can draft this thing with great hazard support, and you can play aggressively with it, getting in on doubles, getting in on the right things, this thing can really just wreak havoc, especially on slower teams. Slower teams hate Zard. The slower teams absolutely just detest playing against Zard, and I don't blame them because Zard Y is a ginormous menace. I had it in the one time I did draft it, so this is one of the ones that's on this list that I only drafted once, but I had so much fun building with it that it, just really had to make it. And Fire type isn't one of my favorite typings in the league. I think it's really unnecessary. But in the one time I drafted on like a hybrid sand team with like Drill and Gigalith and stuff like that. And having Drill, pair with this thing and give it, really, really good spin support was obviously really, really great. And yeah, in the one time, as I said, that I drafted Zard Y, it picked up 9 kills and 6 deaths, which is pretty solid, again, for a mon that's breaking. A mon that's going to come in, it's going to kill a couple kills, and really put on a lot of pressure on your opponent's team. It's a mon I really want to try again if I'm playing any Showdown leagues that are allowing Megas in Gen 8. It's a mon I really, really want to keep trying and try and get a little bit better with and have it pick up some more kills because it looks cool and it is phenomenal as well. Next up for flying, we have Hawlucha. We went from the breaker roll right to the sweep roll. I'm sure you all know what Hawlucha does at this point, the infamous Coco Lucha core that a lot of people really detest. I will start off this with this and preface that I do think Hawlucha is incredibly overrated in my opinion. I think a good player knows how to prep and play around it correctly, and it usually won't sweep in that scenario. However, against newer players, against less experienced players, I think Hawlucha is an absolute menace. It just runs and cleaves through teams. Once you get sufficient chip on certain things, and if you can position it and get it set up correctly, its stats, again, are nothing to really write home about, but you pair that with an Unburden boost, a defense boost from your Electric Seed, and a +2 attack, and 2 really strong stabs in a boosted acro and high jump kick. This thing can just, again, absolutely cleave through teams. I've only drafted it twice, but in both times I've drafted it, it's probably performed the best out of a good majority of the mods on this team when it comes to like kills per death wise and all that stuff. So yeah, Lucha is very, very simple. It's going to do many of the same things every week. It has some cool niche options like Baton Pass if you're playing in a league that allows Baton Pass. I almost brought a SDBP agility Lucha one time to pass into Omega Gyarados, but unfortunately I didn't really pull the trigger on that one. It seemed a little bit too gimmicky. It has access to taunt, so if you're playing against something like a
I got a sweep on a team that, their Lucha check was a Hippowdon, which definitely isn't the best Lucha check in the world, because again, I can just taunt you when you try and low me out, and then I'm going to set to +6, and I'm going to win the game like that. So Lucha is phenomenal, providing on what league you're playing and who you're playing against. It is, at the very least, very, very fun to play with and try and get those Lucha sweeps and stuff like that. But yeah, in the 2 times I drafted Hawlucha, it picked up 30 kills and only died 3 times, which is insane. That's a 10 kills for every 1 death that Hawlucha was getting. It went 20-3 for me in UPO Wi-Fi Season 1. And then in a league I took over for that wasn't the best skill-wise. And ended up going 10-0, which was really, really solid. So yeah, Lucha, again, a little bit overrated, but still a very, very fun mon to use nonetheless. Next up for Ghost, we have Alolan Marowak, and this one was really hard for me, not because I have so many Ghost types that I love, it's because I don't really draft Ghost types. I've drafted Gengar 1 time. It was very early on in my draft career, and I did not perform very well with it, if I'm being completely honest. I performed pretty lackluster with it. I think it went like 6 and 7 or something like that. I'm sure if I tried it again, I would absolutely love it, and I really want to try it in Gen 8, especially on Wi-Fi, because it is a mon that is confirmed for the deck, so I think that would be a lot of fun to use. It seems like a mon that I would absolutely love using. It seems like right up my alley. However, I couldn't really justifiably put it on the list if I didn't really, have any memories of using it or anything like that. So instead, I threw in Alolan Marowak, which is the only real Ghost type other than Spiritomb that I remember using as of recent. And we had an NCP Wi-Fi Season 1, and it was a mon that I drafted, mostly because my team struggled with Steel types a tiny bit, and I thought this would be a nice little decent breaker versus Fat. It was anti-Trick Room as well, gave me another rocker. And this was a mon that really, really pleasantly surprised me. I thought it was going to be mediocre at best, and I absolutely love building with this. It was a mon that I actually very, very rarely brought as like super, super offensive. I usually brought a very fat, I brought a Spadef Marowak to Charizard Y one time with like Pain Split, Fire Punch, Shadow Bone, and Stealth Rock or something like that. And despite having maybe 40 something attack investment, this thing still pretty much 2-hit KO'd everything on my opponent's team. With the Thick Club, it is an absolute menace. It hits incredibly hard, especially if you have a Trick Room team to support it potentially. Getting this thing out of Trick Room means you basically claim kills until Trick Room's over, especially if you can find the opportunity in which to get up a Swords Dance. If you can get up a Swords Dance, then this thing really does just claim kills with, like Rocket Flare Blitzes and Shadow Bones and Earthquakes and stuff like that. This thing is an absolute nightmare to fight. It has to avoid knockoffs like the Plague. However, if you can do so and you keep that Thick Club, you're going to hit things really, really hard. With that base 45 speed, you're not outspeeding much. However, you can outspeed some fat mons and stuff like that. And again, this is really, really good against like balanced teams and really, really fat teams and stuff like that. This is a great, great breaker. It's a pretty reliable stealth rocker, and it's a really, really fun and slept on mon. I think that you should all definitely try it. Again, it's not like insane value in tier 3 or anything like that, but it was definitely a mon that definitely. How many times am I going to say definitely? Definitely. It really pleasantly surprised me. There we go. We didn't even say it that time. Awesome. So yeah, in the one time that I did draft Alolan Marowak in NCP Wi-Fi Season 1, it picked up 7 kills, and it only died 3 times, which is, again, really solid for a mon that I did not think was going to do as much for me. And next up, once I can find it on my little layout thing here, we have Grass, and I think this one was pretty obvious. If you know me, you know I love Tangrowth. This is one of my favorite mons to use, bar none. I think this thing is absolutely phenomenal. It's incredibly bulky. It has access to regen, which in my opinion is by far the best ability in draft. I think, abilities like Intimidate and stuff like that are probably a close second, but regen in singles in general, I just think is so dumb. Being able to use this thing as such a fat, bulky pivot. Basically come in, scout things, take hits, and pivot out again. Making doubling a lot easier and stuff like that too is really, really, really solid. I absolutely love Tangrowth. It's incredibly bulky, like I said, with the 125 defense and 100 HP. Its Spadef is a bit to be desired with only 50, but with an AV you can remedy that pretty quick. It's really, really strong, honestly, for a fat mon, as fat as it is. It has 100 attack and 110 special attack. I've brought in pretty offensive Tangos before, because it can potentially punch holes through teams. Has a really, really good offensive move pool as well. You're going to see a single mixed incredibly often, so I can tech on things like Earthquake and stuff like that, knock off. which means you have to, give up a little speed in the speed department, but you're only base 50 anyways, and your goal usually isn't to outspeed things with Tangrowth. You can go for fun gimmicky chlorophyll sets and stuff like that, but probably just fat regen pivot sets are your best bet. You can even bring like a fat regen life orb set. I've done that before. It's really, really solid though. This thing is just absolutely great at blanket checking so much in the metagame. I absolutely love it. And yeah, in the 3 times that I have drafted Tangrowth, it has picked up 16 kills for me and 7 deaths, which I think is pretty insane for a mon. That is, again, seen as like a fat, bulky pivot. Usually those mons aren't supposed to pick up too many kills. Usually they're going to have much more deaths than they do kills, just because of the fact that they're going to be likely to take more hits and stuff like that. But Tangrowth is a mon that I definitely have enjoyed and used very, very well. And I really hope it makes the Gen 8 cut. I don't know if it has or not yet. I don't have the full list committed to memory, but this is one I absolutely love drafting and love building with and stuff like that. So yeah, that's Tangrowth. Next up for ground, we're going from defense right back to offense, and one of the best breakers in the game in Mamoswine. Another phenomenal breaker. If you can't tell, I love ones that just punch holes through teams, and Mamoswine is definitely one of those. As a dual stop combination of ground and ice is just ridiculous. It hits so much super effectively. It hits so many things. I think it hits pretty much everything neutrally as well. And you have that priority option in Ice Shard, which is obviously really, really good. You have access to Stealth Rocks. You have access to Endeavor, which is cool for Focus Sash Lead Endeavor sets. To potentially pick things off with Ice Shard, which is obviously really good. It's great with the Scarf. It's great with the Band. Life Orb Mammo is terrifying. Metronome Mammo is a bunch of fun because you can kind of just click a stab move and really just punch a hole through a team. I've brought an AV Mamoswine as my Coco check before, despite it having pretty lackluster Spadef. Its HP plus the AV can actually let it check those things pretty decently. And its HP plus its defense that makes it pretty bulky on the Fizz Def side. 80 speed isn't amazing, but this is a mon much like something like a Zard Y or I guess a little Marowak to an extent, where it absolutely just eats bulkier, slower teams up. If you could afford, if the speed tiers allow you and you can afford to run Adamant Mammo, it's really just going to 2-hit KO everything. This is a mon that just doesn't really have switch-ins, and it wasn't really built to have switch-ins. If it was faster, I think this thing would be absolutely busted. Unfortunately, it's not. However, it's still really, really good at the speed tier it's currently at. 70 special attack is somewhat usable in certain matchups and stuff like that. Say you're playing like a Swampert or Seismitoad and you think that's going to be their check. You can take on a Freeze Dry to hit those really hard, or like a Pelipper or something like that, which is obviously really, really nice. Again, Mamoswine is an absolute terror to play against. I love Piloswine too. Don't get me wrong. I think they are both very different, but I figured I'd mention Piloswine here too. I think Pilo is probably one of my favorite tier 5s, and despite it being a much more defensive mon, seeming like a fat defensive role, it's still really threatening offensively as well because it does have that same dual stab combination. So I love Pilo as well, but Mammo, I think is definitely the better of the two. I don't think I'm reaching too much by saying that. But yeah, in the 2 times that we dropped a Mamoswine, it picked up 14 kills and had 12 deaths, which isn't, again, like the 2-to-1 ratio that we had before. But again, in the breaker role that Mamoswine usually has, it's going to pick up 1 or 2 kills. It's going to potentially get up rocks, and then it's going to go down, which is really all you need it to do. If you can punch a hole through your opponent's team, chip some things down, that's really all you need Mamoswine to do. I don't really need it to ever sweep a game for me. Most games, it's usually not going to be the win con. It's going to be the thing that facilitates and sets up your win con. And I think Mammo does a great job at doing that. And yeah. So for our next typing, we have Ice, and I have regular Kyurem. I really wanted to put Kyurem Black, but I have only used it once in draft. I drafted it recently in a tour, and I'm really excited to use it again, but I've really only technically drafted it once, so I didn't feel right putting it on the list. Being that I just don't really have enough experience to say this is one of my favorite ones to use. Regular Kyurem, though, I have drafted a few times, and I think it's a mon that really deserves a little bit more love. This thing is a huge threat, especially if you can snag it in tier 3. I think it's one of the more slept on tier 3s in my opinion. It has 130 in each of its attack stats. That's not just in its special attack, that's in its physical attack too. Kyurem is 100% viable mixed. I've brought physical Kyurem many times as well. This thing is great with a choice Scarf. It is great with a choice Specs. It's a great Z user. It's Sub Roost is a phenomenal set, like Sub Roost Ice Beam Earth Power or Sub Roost Ice Beam Toxic. If you can bring a Toxic on this thing, like you're not playing against a very good Steel type or something like that, it's really phenomenal. It's another mon that actually abuses Metronome, so 2 mons in a row that really do enjoy the Metronome item, in my opinion. It's Kyurem, Mamoswine, and Greninja, all mons that are on this list are mons that I've actually brought Metronome on multiple times. But Kyurem here is incredibly strong. It's not the fastest thing in the world. It does have that kind of wonky 95 speed tier, which isn't the best. However, it is incredibly bulky as well. 125 base HP and 90 in each of its defenses makes this thing incredibly fat, and you can tinker with its EVs to where to live most hits for you pretty comfortably. I absolutely love this thing. I think it's really phenomenal. I think it's really slept on. I really wish people would use this thing more and see kind of the potential that it has if you use it correctly. But yeah, in the 2 times that I drafted Kyurem, it picked up 12 kills and only died 5 times, which again, something pretty solid. Something I definitely wouldn't complain about in the slightest. Really solid for a tier 3 mon that again is really slept on in my opinion. Next up for normal, we have another slept on tier 3, in my opinion, which is going to be Porygon Z. This is a phenomenal breaker. Adaptability, tri-attacks off that 135 base special attack is insane. Or you can go download, potentially get the boost, go +1 special attack and throw it off like that. That also works very well. And that's also good in a sense that this thing can 100% go mixed. If you're playing against a really fat Spadaf, well, let's say you're going up against a Blissey, and you know that that's going to be their check to this thing, you can, throw on a download and then throw in return and to get a +1 attack boost because you do have base 80 attack. So at +1, you're going to be chunking that Blissey really well. This thing has access to setup in agility and nasty plot, which makes this thing a really potent sweeper in certain games, not just a breaker, but really good at sweeping and cleaning up teams potentially if you can set it up. It's a little bit harder to set up. It's not the bulkiest thing in the world, but it's also not incredibly frail. And again, it's only weak to fighting because it's a normal type. So if you EV it correctly, you can live pretty much any of 1 hit at the very least. This thing has a great move pool as well. It has access to Bolt Beam coverage, a Shadow Ball, Dark Pulse to hit those, Ghost types that would switch into Tri-Attack. Otherwise, it doesn't really have anything to hit Steel super effectively other than Hidden Power Fire. However, you can usually break through those, chip those down with other mons because they don't typically have the reliable recovery to check Porygon Z over a long period of time. This thing's great with specs, it's great with a Scarf, great with a Life Orb, great with a Z move. I really do think this thing is slept on. I absolutely love using it. It's one of those mons, it's really slept on, and if it has the matchup, it's going to do the utmost to work. It's kind of a pain finding the matchup for it. Sometimes it just doesn't really have the speed tier for it at base 90. It's a little bit iffy. However, if you can find the correct matchup for it, it really can just punch holes through your opponent's team or potentially even clean up and win late game. But yeah, in the 2 times that I drafted Porygon Z, I picked up 13 kills and 10 deaths. The first time I drafted it, I had a little bit more success with it. I drafted it in UPO Showdown. I believe it was season 5 or something like that. Where it did pretty well for me. I had an IVL. I didn't use it to the best of its capabilities. I believe it went 2 and 4 for me there. However, I think it did, that was more so me just not really finding matchups for it and needing other things due to my team composition, stuff like that. So PZ is definitely another really slept on mod. I really do. So I guess you guys try it out if you have the chance. And yeah, next up for Poison, we have yet another staple of mine. Again, if you know me, you know I love Nidoqueen. I have it in Poison because I wanted to put Mamoswine in ground, but this is by far my favorite ground type. I didn't have another Poison type. That's kind of why I put this in Poison, actually. But Nidoqueen is by far my favorite ground type to draft in the format. It's such a good mon. It's such a good blanket check to so many things in the tier. It gives you a grounded Poison, again, obviously being a Poison type. Which is the whole point of this entry, which is obviously really good to absorb T-Spikes. And it has T-Spikes of its own as well as Stealth Rocks, and it is an incredibly reliable Stealth Rock setter. This thing just has the natural bulk to live pretty much any one hit really well. It's something that really appreciates a resist barrier, in my opinion, too. Like Shuka Nidoqueen is kind of like, something like a staple you really see on this mod. You can see like a Shuka Life Orb or like a 50% berry, something like that. This thing's one of the best Coco checks in the game. Just one of the best fast electric type checks in the game in general. Because HP Ices are bouncing off this thing if you're Spadef or something like that. So I really like Nidoqueen in that sense. I think it's a really good check to an archetype of mon that's going to be on a good majority of drafts and stuff like that. I don't want to be hold switched all over. I don't want to be, all that good stuff. So Nidoqueen's great at preventing that. And despite being seen as a more defensive version of Nidoking and being a little bit bulkier, a little bit slower and weaker, it still hits incredibly strong despite its mediocre attack stats, just due to sheer force and potential Life Orb teched onto there. It's going to absolutely punch holes through teams, and it has insane coverage to back it up, being like, Bolt Beam and Flamethrower and Earth Power Sludge Wave and, Sucker Punch for priority, just so many options for this thing to hit opposing teams with, and that plus again the sheer force life orb kind of set, it's really still going to be a great wall breaker despite having pretty middling stats in that category. So yeah, Nidoqueen by far one of my favorite mods. I only had it recorded that I drafted it 4 times on the sheet, but I know I've drafted it many more times. I haven't recorded every single league that I've played on this sheet, and I know I've drafted Nidoqueen more than that. But in the 3 times, only 3 times on the sheet. I've drafted more. On the 3 times that I've drafted it, according to the sheet, it has picked up 12 kills and 18 deaths. Again, that's not a very solid, KD line right there at all. However, again, I don't think that's Nidoqueen's role. Nidoqueen's role is to be bulky, check some things, get up rocks, and just kind of facilitate to where you win the game with your other mods. But again, I think it's really good at what it does, and I absolutely love this thing. So yeah, that's going to be Nidoqueen for our favorite poison type / ground type. More so ground. I just didn't have another poison. But yeah, for Psychic, on to a bit more of a predictable pick right here in Mew. Now, I love the Psychic typing in Draft League format. I have so many Psychics that I absolutely adore using. I love using Reuniclus. I love using Victini. I love using Azelf, which is one of my favorite mods. I really want to put that here just to show it some love. However, in the one time I used Mew, I just fell in love with this mod. I think it's just absolutely phenomenal. It's so versatile. If you know me, you know my favorite part of playing League is the building aspect. I love building teams. I love tinkering with EVs, move sets, items, all that stuff. And Mew is literally the perfect mod. It's like the Draft League, staple in that sense. It's even stat distribution of 100 across the board, having access to pretty much every move in the game. This thing is an absolute blast to prep with, and it's a pain to play against because there's so many different options. Routes it can go. It can go, in like the fat, defensive Mew, or like the stall breaker Mew with like Super Fang Taunt, Will-O-Wisp, Roost, or something like that. Or it can go offensive and go Nasty Plot, or Calm Mind, be a fat Calm Mindset. It can be Swords Dance or Bulk Up. Bulk Up's my personal favorite. I got a 6-0 sweep with that one time. I absolutely love Bulk Up. I think it's another really phenomenal a phenomenal option on this thing. It just kind of goes to show how versatile this thing is and how annoying it can be to build against. If you draft around it correctly and you draft a team in which you don't need Mew to be a fat defensive bond in every single game, and that's when it really does shine. I'm sure you've heard that a million times. So at this point, I feel like that's like the token thing that people say when they draft Mew is like, I didn't draft it, so it has to be defensive all the time. But it really is true. In all honesty, this thing can really just be a huge burden on your opponent to take down or to stop once it gets rolling with some setup and stuff like that. So yeah, Mew, definitely one of my favorite mods to draft. And the one time I drafted in IBL Season 6, it picked up 14 kills and 9 deaths. So I absolutely had a blast with this thing. And hopefully I'll get to draft in Gen 8 because it is confirmed because of the Pokeball Plus. I do think that it's going to be a little hard to draft Mew because it's probably going to be one of the more sought-after mods in the Gen 8 Wi-Fi format at the very least, just because it is one of the best mods that is returning at the, returning to the games. And yeah, that's going to be Mew. Next up for Rock, we have Mega Aerodactyl. This is yet another mod that I've only drafted once. Well, I technically drafted twice because in that tour where I drafted Kyurem B again, I drafted Mega Aerodactyl again because that's I had them both together before and I wanted to try them out again. I absolutely love Mega Aero. 150 base speed is insane. You hardly ever have to run barely any speed on this thing. There's very little matches where you're not running Adamant, or you can even run Jolly just so you can fully invest in your bulk and just be really fat. And that's one of the reasons I really think Mega Aerodactyl is so good, is because of the fact that you can afford so much extra EVs in your other stats, such as HP and defense and super def and stuff like that. So you can take those extra hits from those mons that would potentially threaten you, and you can retaliate and knock them out, potentially 2-KO them. Because, Mega Aerodactyl, it's not the bulkiest thing in the world, but if you are investing heavily and you're going, able to go, max HP or, throw in a lot of defense or super def or something like that, you're going to be able to take those hits that you normally otherwise wouldn't be able to take, which is great. 135 attack with Tough Claws boost is phenomenal as well. Thing's going to hit really hard. Edgequake is a great combination. This thing can pretty often run on top of its stab of Aerial Ace to where those bulky grasses aren't going to want to switch into that combo, which is really nice. Has access to Hone Claws for setup. Has access to things like the Elemental Fangs, I believe. It has access to Aqua Tail, which is Tough Claws boosted. It has access to Roost for reliable recovery. Incredibly fast defog. I think it's probably the fastest defog in the game, which is great. It's access to Taunt, which is one of the fastest taunts in the game, which is again phenomenal. I think I said rocks already. This thing is just phenomenal. I absolutely love using Mega Aerodactyl. I think it's really, really fun to build with. I think it's really slept on. It's not a mon that's going to, pick up 25 kills in a season or anything like that, but it's going to do really, really well nonetheless, in my opinion. So yeah, and the one time that I drafted Mega Aerodactyl, it picked up 12 kills and had 10 deaths, which is pretty solid for a low-end Tier 1 Mega or a, high-end Tier 2 Mega. I really did have a blast using this thing. And yeah, on to the next one, which is yet another Mega and yet another Mon we only used once back in IBL Season 6 alongside Mew, which is going to be Mega Scizor. Mega Scizor is amazing. This thing is so bulky and it is so strong. Swords Dance really does just cleave through teams late game if you can position it correctly. Put things in range of the +2 Technician Bullet Punch off of a base 150 attack, might I add. People usually see Mega Scizor as like a fat set of mon. They're thinking, oh, this thing is ridiculously fat. Defense and SpDef wise. SpDef, I mean, it has great SpDef, but it's not like, the bulkiest thing in the world. But it has a base 140 defense, 70 HP. But people forget that this thing literally has 150 base attack, which is a whole 10 points stronger than its defense. This thing is incredibly strong. It's ridiculous. If you can afford an offensive Scizor in a week, I dare you to try it. It's going to 2-8 KO a lot of things. This thing's ridiculously strong with the Technician Bullet Punch. Another cool option was Quick Attack that I can get for those mons that would resist the potential Bullet Punch. That you can pick off with a +2 Quick Attack. Like I brought that for an Infernape one time, I believe. And it just absolutely, with just a little bit of chip, +2 Quick Attack really did run through that thing. Great bulky pivot and U-turn. Has access to Roost and Defog, superpower for Steel Types, which is obviously really good. Knockoff. This thing is just really, really, really solid. Even if it's not in that Swords Dance role, if it's just like a bulky pivot with Defog or something like that, with Bullet Punch, U-turn, Roost, Defog, another really, really obvious set and really, bland. But it does check the things it needs to check. It lures in things. It grabs you great momentum, and it gets you into your other threats. So I really did enjoy Mega Scizor. I think it's really, really, really solid. I've used regular Scizor before too, but I kind of prefer Mega, if I'm going to be honest. I think it's a little bit bulkier. It's stronger. Without a boosting item, I suppose. If regular Scizor threw on like a life orb, I think it would probably be stronger or something like that. But Mega Scizor is still very, very solid nonetheless. Definitely my favorite of the two. And the one time we drafted it, it picked up 12 kills and only died 6 times. Which again, 2 kills for every 1 death, which I will 100% take in any scenario with any mon. That's really, really solid. And yeah, on to the last mon of the list. We have Keldeo. Keldeo is incredibly slept on, in my opinion. I absolutely love this mon. People kind of see it as a, no pun intended, a one-trick pony. Either, I guess like a 2-trick pony. Either being like a choice item like Specs or Scarf, or being like a Calm Mind, so Calm Mindset. And yes, that may be a little bit true. I won't lie to you. It does kind of only do those things. It's so good at those things, I really don't think it matters. I absolutely love this thing. I had an NCP Wi-Fi Season 1, and it was the MVP of the league. It put in so much work for me. It did so well. And I had it in AP Academy. For only a couple weeks, we unfortunately had to drop it just to not make the rest of our team suffer composition-wise and stuff like that. But in the few weeks that we had it, I believe it went 4-2, and then it went 23-6 in NCP Wi-Fi Season 1. So again, this is one I have had so much success with. I absolutely love it. It's a great Scarfer. Again, it's great with Specs. Sub Calm Mind. Calm Mind is great. Has access to Taunt, so you can beat potential other bulky waters that want to switch in and, toxic you and wear you down like that. You could bring like Taunt, Calm Mind, Dual Stabs. Secret Sword is a great move just to hit things on the defensive side if it, you are playing a defensive wall. Or a SpDef wall or something like that. You want to hit on the physical side. Scald is a great move in general, just to get those 30% burns. And yeah, Keldeo is just really, really solid overall. Excuse me. Right at the end of the video is when I get the yawning. We have to have one or it wouldn't be a video on my channel, yeah? But yeah, Keldeo, again, I drafted twice.